Welcome to this channel. Here we are going to talk about the stories of our Holy Bible. And today's story will be about Hosea as governor, so let's go. 2 years passed. One day the king of Egypt dreamed that he was standing on the bank of the Nile River. Suddenly, 7 beautiful and fat cows came out of the river, which began to eat the grass on the riverbank. Soon after, 7 other cows, ugly and skinny, left the river and stayed close to the first cows, on the riverbank. And the ugly and skinny cows swallowed up the beautiful and fat ones. Then the king woke up. But he went back to sleep and had another dream. This time he saw 7 ears of wheat growing from one stalk. They were good and full of grain. Then came 7 ears dry and scorched by the hot desert wind, and they swallowed up the 7 ears full and good. The king woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning he was very worried, and so he sent for all the diviners and all the wise men of Egypt. The king told his dreams, but none of the wise men were able to give an explanation. Then the chief cupbearer said to the king, "The time has come to own up to a mistake I made. One day the master got angry with me and the chief baker and sent us to jail, in the house of the captain of the guard. One night each of us had a dream, and each dream meant one thing. There in the jail there was with us a Hebrew boy, who was a slave to the captain of the guard. We told this young man about our dreams, and he explained what they meant. And everything worked out, just as he had said. I went back to my job, and the baker was hanged. So the king sent for Joseph, and they hurried to get him out of jail. He shaved, changed his clothes and presented himself to the king. Then the king said, I had a dream that no one could explain. I hear you can explain dreams. That's not up to me, Hosea replied. It is God who will give an answer for your good, O king. Then the king said, I dreamed that I was standing on the bank of the Nile. Suddenly, 7 beautiful and fat cows came out of the river, which began to eat the grass on the riverbank. Then 7 other cows came out of the river, but these were ugly and skinny. In all my life I never saw such ugly cows in Egypt as those. And the ugly, skinny cows swallowed up the pretty, fat ones, but you didn't even notice it, because they were still as ugly as before. Then I woke up. Then I had another dream. I saw 7 ears of wheat, good and full of grain, which came out of one stalk. Then came 7 ears dry and scorched by the hot desert wind, and they swallowed up the 7 ears full and good. I told the dreams to the diviners, but none of them was able to explain them. Then Joseph said to the king, The 2 dreams mean the same thing. Through them God is telling you what he is going to do. The 7 beautiful cows are 7 years old, and the 7 good ears are also. The 2 dreams mean the same thing. The 7 skinny and ugly cows that came out of the river after the pretty ones, and also the 7 ears dry and burned by the hot desert wind, are 7 years in which food will be lacking. It is just as I said, God has shown you, O king, what he is going to do. 7 years will come when there will be plenty of food throughout Egypt. Then will come 7 years of famine. And the famine will be so terrible that no one will remember the time when there was much food in Egypt. The repetition of the dream means that God decided to do this and will do it soon. And Joseph continued. So it will be good for you, O king, to choose an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge of the country. The king must also choose men who will be in charge of traveling throughout the country to collect 1/5 of all crops during the 7 years that they are good. During the good years that are coming, these men will gather all the wheat they can and store it in storehouses in the cities, with everything controlled by the Lord. Thus, the food will serve to supply the country during the 7 years of famine in Egypt, and the people will not die of hunger. Joseph's advice pleased the king and his officials. And the king said to them, We couldn't find anyone better to run the country than Joseph, a man in whom the Spirit of God is. Then he turned to Joseph and said, God has shown you all this, and so it is clear that there is no one who has more ability and wisdom than you. You will be in charge of my palace, and all my people will obey your orders. I alone will have more authority than you, for I am the king. At this time I make you governor of all Egypt. So the king took his signet ring off his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. Then he ordered them to clothe him in fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. Then he had Joseph get into the chariot reserved for the highest official in Egypt after the king ordered his men to go ahead of him, shouting, "Make way." So Joseph was made governor of all Egypt. The king said to Joseph, "I am the king, but without your permission no one can do anything in all the land of Egypt." The king named Joseph Zaphenath-Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, a priest in the city of Heliopolis, to wife. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of the king of Egypt. He left the king's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty the earth produced grain in great quantity. And Joseph gathered all the cereals and stored them in storehouses in the cities, in each city the cereals harvested from the neighboring fields. Jose gathered so much food that he gave up weighing it, because there was no more, it looked like the sand on the sea beach. Before the years of famine began, Joseph had 2 sons by his wife Asenath. He named the first one Manasseh and explained it like this: "God made me forget all my sufferings and all my father's family." The second son he named Ephraim and said, "God has given me children in the land where I have suffered." So the 7 years of plenty in Egypt ended, and, as Joseph had said, the 7 years of famine began. In other countries the people were starving, but throughout Egypt there was enough to eat. When the Egyptians began to starve, they went to the king to ask for food. He said, "Go talk to Jose and do what he says." When famine spread throughout the country, Joseph opened all the stores and began selling grain to the Egyptians. And people came to Egypt from every country to buy grain from Joseph, because there was a great lack of food all over the world. If you liked this video, don't forget to leave your like.